bucktails, blade baits.
Bucktails?
Oh God, yeah. Snapping bucktails as hard as you could snap them. And as it was falling, and you're watching your line, and you chuck it as far as you want, and you'd see that line straighten right out, tight, like this. Crack. The awakening angler comes from that awakening in my life personally, with some other things that put my fishing life in perspective.
Randy said I was a guitar player a couple episodes ago, so I thought I'd have to prove that out. Mission accomplished. I'm excited. I'm excited about this week's podcast. Welcome back to the Cast Line Podcast, by the way. I've been going back and forth as to whether or not I should be excited on the intro of a podcast, or if it should be like the old radio voice, just soothing, soft rock all evening long. I don't really know. Maybe I'm thinking about it too much. Am I overthinking it? Probably. That's what I tend to do. But anyhow, this should be a really cool discussion because it's got a lot of good fishing content in it in terms of tips, tricks, new things that I hadn't even heard of before. There's a lot of things I haven't heard of before, but good stuff. But also a really in-depth conversation about like the meaning of fishing, the purpose of fishing, and like what it means to, connect with nature. How fishing can be not only a sport, not only a fun experience, but almost like a spiritual experience in some kind of ways. I don't know. It is for me. Maybe I'm just kind of nerding out about it. But my guest on this episode, Matt Gutchess, also nerded out about it really hard, which is cool. We have a lot in common. We're both fishing guides. We both have fishing YouTube channels, and we also both wrote a book. I don't know that there's a lot of people in the world that have that trio of things in common. So it was a really cool conversation to get to meet him. It was the first time I ever talked to him outside of email. So it was cool to meet him kind of candidly. And I thought about like catching up with him first, getting to know him. And I thought, you know what, let's just do it live on the podcast. I think that'd be way cooler. So it was a fairly lengthy conversation. Hopefully you want to hear all of it. But to that end, I will be quiet now so we can get on with the show. Matt Gutchess, the Awakening Angler, up next. What's up, Matt Gutchess, the Awakening Angler? Thanks so much for taking the time to chit chat with me. How's it going, man?
Oh, Brett, it's a pleasure, and thank you for having me. What an honor.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
What's going on? What's going on is right.
Not a whole lot for me. I'm trying to ice fish. This is being recorded on January 3rd. It's probably not going to be published that soon, but I'm trying to ice fish. Haven't been able to ice fish because we can't get any ice. And I saw you posted a video. You were fishing New Year's Day, right? Open water?
Yeah, still.
Yeah.
I mean, I live right on the river that goes
Okay.
out. I'm about a mile from our main lake, and so my boat's 40 feet from me right now, tied up to my
Yeah.
dock. But
Very
we don't
cool.
have any signs of ice anytime in the near future here.
Yeah.
Looking 10 days out, I mean, it gets cold at night, but I mean, it's still going up into the high 30s, low 40s during the day. And with any kind of wind, my lake's still 36 degrees.
Yeah.
But now how far north are you? I'm shocked that you don't have ice yet.
So here's the deal. You might be confused by this. I spend half of my time in two different states. So I'm a guide and a YouTuber and all that stuff for Lake Sakakawea, North Dakota, 6.5 months of the year. But I was born and raised in Iowa. So I'm back here in Iowa now. I have a house in Iowa yet.
Oh.
And then I just try to do like ice fishing trips and this kind of stuff, whatever I can do for YouTube. So I'm in Iowa right now.
Gotcha.
But Sakakawea doesn't have a ton of ice either. There's some spots, some bays that are fishable, but the main lake is, I don't even think even close to ice fishable yet. So,
it's the one thing on that, and I know it's funny, and not to be political in any way, but in the old days when they started talking about global warming,
yeah,
anybody that's in the outdoor industry, and I've been doing this since I came home from the Army in 1994, is if you don't believe in global warming, you're not paying attention. Something, I mean, listen, I'm in upstate New York. I'm a mile from the, or I'm an hour from the Canadian border. And normally you would have snow by Thanksgiving, and it didn't leave until the end of, March, April. Trout season opened April 1st, and you never knew if you were going to be fishing in snow or, and I mean, it just, I have no plans of taking my boat out of the water anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, politics aside, like something is shifting. Whether it's our responsibility or not, whether we can do anything about it or not, I don't know. But things are different. There is
Yeah.
not as much cold weather throughout the year.
the there is a university, Cornell University has a field study station on our lake.
Hmm.
Um, Cornell's just south of here, and somebody put up the other day, and I'm friends with one of their head biologists, and he's done some stuff with us for Walleye Fest, and his nephew and I used to do on the water, like, um, state of the lake kind
Yeah.
of talks. He worked for the DEC as well for our state organization, and and he said that he told me that in recorded history that they have, that there's only been two winners our lake didn't ice over.
Mm.
And I don't know how far back. I would assume it goes back into the 1800s somewhere,
Hmm.
So I'm sure it will come, but
Yeah.
it's terrible if you're a retailer up here
Yeah.
and you're trying to sell ice fishing gear. I
Yeah, I
feel I
suppose.
feel I feel for those guys.
Yeah. So speaking of that, what lake is it that you do fish? You're in New York, right? East Coast.
I'm in central New York, right at the
Okay.
crossroads. We're just north of Syracuse, and I fish an Ida Lake primarily. That's the lake I live on, my home water. I spent my career guiding on and chartering on Lake Ontario and its tributaries, Eastern Lake Ontario. I grew up as a little kid on the St. Lawrence River, in Cape Vincent. Now, with my grandparents. So, I mean, those are my three. If you looked at my fishing life, that's a triangle. It's those three bodies of water I've spent most of my life on,
Okay.
going back and forth. Yeah, I happen to live on Oneida Lake now,
Got
um,
it.
and I fish it, well, half the time at least.
Nice.
So,
So what's that lake like? Like I've never fished for walleyes outside of what I would call the Midwest. So um, obviously that's probably one of the primary places people go to fish walleyes, the Midwest, Canada, stuff like that. I've heard that there's walleyes in New York, but I've never obviously been there to try it. So what is walleye fishing like out there? Have you fished in the Midwest before for walleyes or any other species?
I have not. In, let's see. I'm involved now in the industry much more. I'm a pro staffer for JT Rods, who's based
Okay.
out of Farmington, Minnesota. I also am a pro staffer for, Starcraft Boats in Indiana. I was just in Indiana at the pro staff meetings a couple of weeks ago, and oddly enough, we live just north of Syracuse, New York, where the factory was for Starcraft was just outside of Syracuse, Indiana. I had no idea there was another
Oh,
Syracuse, and there was even a Lake Syracuse that we
yeah.
were that the hotel we stayed in was on, and I was dying to get out there fishing, and I see three boats out there, but listen, in New York State, I say this to people a lot. So I grew up and cut my teeth in the trout and salmon industry in the Great Lakes. Had my own charter boat. I ran drift boats for years on the tributaries. I've been doing that since I was a kid with my uncle, but professionally since I was, oh, I came home in '94, so I was 23. Um, and I got into guiding, and I got a job as a first mate on a charter boat, and spent the next 20 years doing that, full time. But I would put New York State up, and I'll be the homer for my state.
Hmm.
I'd put I'd put New York in the top 3 states in the country for fishing,
Okay.
only behind Minnesota, and I would say tied with Wisconsin.
Okay.
And all the Great Lakes states can attest to the great fishing of the Great Lakes. But inland, we have just we have the St. Lawrence Seaway, which now, if you're a bass guy at all, the last 2 years, the BASS Elite Series came up there. They've had 5 guys now in 2 years break the 100-pound mark with smallmouth only,
On 10
over a
fish?
100 pounds, huh?
On how many fish?
20.
20 fish. Okay, so 5 pound average plus. Wow.
Yep, yep. I mean, it's that fishery and the not only that, but like this is the renaissance for if you're a big smallmouth guy, you know all about Eastern Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River,
Okay.
and that is getting such a following. I pull into ramps at times where I think that no one else is going to be around, and there's
Mm-hmm.
3 wrap trucks that are there pre-practicing for later on in the season, and or just guys that can't get enough of it because it's addicting. It's terribly addicting, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not to mention the world-class walleye fishery that's in both those same locations for big pelagic walleyes. Your 30s. It's not uncommon. My years of guiding, I've netted a dozen 30 inchers, for clients, um, in the spring and the fall, throughout, trolling up there for them as a bycatch. You never know. But then inland from the Great Lakes, in the St. Lawrence, we have an I Lake. My Lake is the largest inland lake in New York State. It's 25 miles long and 8 miles wide. Um, Not real deep, but it's got. So if you, Brett, if you came and said, "Hey, Matt, I'm gonna come fish with you today," my first question for you would be, "What do you want to catch, and what's your favorite way to catch them?" And then we'll go find the fish that'll work for that way,
Makes sense.
because you have everything you could possibly want. Not to mention, you got, my lake is always been known for walleyes in all of upstate New York, um, and the East Coast, but smallmouth, largemouth. Um, BASS has been the Elite Series has been here multiple times. The Night of Lake was in the top 10 rankings in BASS. What, 10 years ago? So we have an excellent fishery there. Not to mention the Finger Lakes.
Yeah.
The Finger Lakes region, Cayuga Lake, they've broke the state record smallmouth twice in the last 2 years.
There you go.
So we have such an abundance of freshwater fishing in this state. It really is. Fishing's great in New York State. Always
Nice.
has been.
The
Um,
funny thing is, you mentioned smallmouth. I do walleyes are my preferred, but I do love catching smallmouth, and we have a pretty darn good smallmouth fishery, Sakakawea and the surrounding area, the smaller lakes. But the funny thing
okay.
is, like most people treat them as like a nuisance fish. They get in the way of the walleye fishing. So
Yeah.
nobody
Yeah.
wants to catch them. And anytime I post a video of smallmouth fishing, it gets, I don't know, 10% of the views maybe of a walleye video. I might get some bad comments. Why are you messing around? Why are you bothering? But I think it's a lot of fun. And you can't fish walleyes every day. You got to change it up sometimes.
1,000%. Listen, I mean, it's the
Yeah.
same way for me. Like the last month or so, the fishing's been so out of control good. I've just been throwing swim baits, just as a, for instance. I've just been
Okay.
throwing little finesse swim baits in 15 foot of water along where the old weed edge died,
Yeah.
and they live there, and my end of the lake is a big, shallow, fertile flat. It gets to about
Okay.
22 feet, um, on my half of the lake, and every time you feel that little tick on the end of that swim bait, you don't know what you're setting the hook on.
Yeah.
And I've set it on carp, on sheep's head, but I mean it could be a smallmouth or a walleye, and back to back cast. They can be one or the other or both. You never know. They all live in the same spots. You
Hmm.
know, if a smallmouth's hanging on an area, there's a reason for it, and there's walleyes there too, and
Yeah.
vice versa. So
Yep.
um, I it's funny. Like to me, they're interchangeable, And even as a kid on the St. Lawrence, like we ate smallmouth. That was what we caught most of, and we ate them all the time. Like, and they're delicious. Honestly, I mean, nobody talks about it, but they really are good. And but everybody wants walleye. I get it. I don't guide anymore much, and I don't guide on my lake. Um, and I don't. My family doesn't eat a whole lot of fish. I'm just out there to catch them. And I get comments every day on every video of mine. Where are you putting all those fish back? Give them to me. I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
come on, catch them then.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I don't keep many. So for me, like that part of walleye fishing doesn't really matter to me.
Yep.
I love walleyes. I love them. I love them.
Hmm.
No matter how you do it, I spent all summer snapping shiver minnows until my carpal tunnel set in my
Hmm.
arm. I'm like, I can't
Yep.
do this anymore.
Yep.
Um, but
So
yeah,
is that what is that probably the main way you catch summer walleyes where you are? Do you do a lot of trolling? Is trolling a big thing? Is it mostly casting? What do you guys do up there?
you can do anything you want. You could be trolling, certainly hard baits. You could be pulling worm harnesses.
Okay.
Um, you can do, like I say, you can do anything you want. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't care what you have in your mind or what your sweet spot is. You can come to my lake particularly and execute that plan. You just got to find the fish, which isn't hard. See, but our lake isn't a um, so. All right, I'll give you another little. You said you didn't even know about walleyes in New York State. Walleyes are indigenous here, and we have a really extensive and um, technically outstanding hatchery on our lake that
Okay.
distributes walleyes throughout New York State, and they're all the way from the Niagara River um, through Lake Ontario, all the Finger Lakes, Oneida, and multiple other bodies of water and river systems. So walleyes are pretty widespread. Chautauqua Lake um, in this state. Our lake isn't known as a big fish lake by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay.
Um, Ours would be, for all intents and purposes, a put and take eater lake. You're 15 inches is legal, 20 inches is a good fish. Most of your fish fall in that range. Um, Anything over 20 is good. Anything over 25 is really good. And as far as we know, there's never been a recorded 30 in our lake. Not at the hatchery, not at the Cornell station, never. So someday someone, I've heard of 28s, which means there should be a 30, but I don't know that anyone's ever caught one.
Gotcha. Was
But
the National Walleye Tour was in New York? Or no, hold on. Was it National Walleye Tour or was it that head-to-head fishing thing? Have you watched that on YouTube?
I have not. I've heard about it, but I haven't watched it.
I think it might have been that, and I can't remember if it was Chautauqua or Oneida.
Probably Chautauqua. Chautauqua's got much bigger fish.
Okay.
Not as many, but they're bigger.
Okay, because yeah, when I was watching this, for one thing, I think the tournament was like late August, early September, and it was like really, really hot. They weren't catching a lot of fish, but A, if it's that time of year, that's hard anywhere. B, if it's a more of a big fish lake, that makes a lot of sense. So, but I think it was
Yeah.
that head, yeah, it was a head-to-head walleye fishing thing. Anyway,
No, I'll,
sidetrack.
I'll have to. I have heard of that, but I have not. I've never seen it. But that's like I say though. Our season opens May 1st nowadays, and I don't think it matters what you do as long as you do it well. I
Hmm.
mean, bucktails, blade baits, any of the jigging wrap style baits.
Bucktails?
Um, oh God, yeah. I,
Really?
Yep. Deep and shallow. We have a lot of structure in our lake, a lot of mid lake reefs and shoals, and
Okay.
and these walleyes will get up on those scattered weeds throughout, and a lot of zebra mussels in our lake up in those mussel beds,
Uh,
in those shoal beds, and they're looking for crayfish scooting around in there, and boy, we made a pretty good living And I'm out, like I say, I'm out every day. I was filming and putting up content every day, and usually probably 3 days a week I'd have guys in the boat with me, friends, whoever,
Hmm.
and we'd make a pretty good living in 6, 7 foot of water all summer, snapping bucktails as hard as you could snap them, and
Really?
it would just shoot right off the bottom. And as it was falling, and you're watching your line, and you chuck it as far as you want, and you'd see that line straighten right out tight, like this,
Hmm.
crack. And I mean, they no joke were they just, and it's funny that was such a reaction bite. Um, Unlike a shiver minute where you get a lot of them,
Yep.
around here, they were ambushed. Those fish were set up in the weeds, and they were ambush killing what they saw come ripping by. Like
Huh.
you weren't, because they were crushing it, and they weren't anywhere but inside.
Yeah.
It's that was a lot of fun. We had a couple of friends of mine and I had a lot of fun those days. You could do the same thing with a little small swim bait. So when it
Sure.
was falling, you had that little bit of tail wiggle going down. But it
Yep.
had to be rigged on a twist lock or something so you didn't keep ripping it off, because you'd rip it right through the weeds. Didn't
Yeah.
matter. I'd fish straight braid right to the jig, and you sometimes you'd want it. Some days they wanted you to make contact with the weed stalks, um, and rip it right through there. And I don't know what was about it, but they liked it.
Huh.
And they were there. Everybody thinks walleyes are out in the deep, and our lake,
Yeah.
they're everywhere. There are
Yep.
walleyes out deep, but boy, there's a pile of them. I caught one this morning in 6 foot of water,
Uh-huh.
36-degree water. Um,
I think people are learning more and more that there's always walleyes in the weeds. And that's a place you can go to get away from the crowds. They're unpressured fish.
Absolutely.
There might
And you
not be as
can,
many of them on certain lakes, but there's always going to be some.
and when you find, at least I shouldn't say that. My experience has been when I've found a bite or two in a stretch of weeds, there's more in
Yeah.
those weeds. They're still a schooling fish, even when they move in there.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, the weed bite has. I have a good friend of mine that is bee hammer tackle, and he makes a castable worm harness that he's
Yeah.
shrunk down, made out of heavier fluorocarbon, single hook, big willow leaf. So that big willow leaf keeps that blade, or keeps that hook free. You could put whatever behind it. I've put plastics behind it. You can put a crawler behind it or a part of one and then above it, you're pegging a worm weight. So you're almost Carolina rigging it, but it's real light, or it's a bead chain, um, and you just go through those weed tops. That's a lot of fun too. That's a very fun bite.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I've always felt
That's a
like,
summer, yeah.
yeah, as effective as trolling bottom bouncers and worm harnesses is, sometimes it gets a little boring trolling. Some people like to cast more. I always thought it'd be cool. Like when I first heard about it, Lake Erie, where they would have the weight forward inline spinners that they
Yep,
would use out there. Like I
yep.
think
Erie
that'd be a lot of
Dearies.
fun casting over weeds. We don't have a ton of weeds on Sakakawea. There's pockets of them in certain bays, especially on the lower end of the reservoir, but we don't do a ton of weed fishing there, so it'd have to be somewhere else more than likely. But it sounds like so much fun to try.
And we have weeds. Our whole lake is weeds. For a
There you
number of
go.
reasons. I mean, it's completely inhabited all the way around it. So there's one reason. And but so it's there's no way that you could avoid having those walleyes in the weeds.
Hmm.
Um, but all through the walleye belt, there's people are learning as we go along. Well, all these bass fishermen fishing tournaments out here would, years ago would be like, I can't keep the walleyes off. I can't catch a bass because the walleyes won't leave me alone.
Oh, that's funny.
Or the jerkbait revolution. You
Hmm.
know, um, the jerkbait walleye revolution on my lake is going strong. I mean, everybody's got a box full of $25 jerkbaits, and those walleyes can't resist them. I mean, there's a
Hmm.
Wednesday night walleye league here on our lake, and I can think of a lot of checks that were cashed with guys that only throw jerkbaits on the shoals in the afternoon. Like that's all they do,
Yeah.
um, and it's just filthy with them. So
Yep.
it's exciting.
Hmm.
I'm a fish head. It's I mean, I love talking fishing and all this stuff, and I just like being out there every day. I like figuring out that daily puzzle and
Yeah.
doing my thing, And I it's funny. I love creating content way more than uh, dealing with clients and guiding. I can tell you that much.
Yeah,
Um,
so for everybody listening, we are talking with the Awakening Angler. He is also a YouTuber. He has a channel, The Awakening Angler. Feel free to check that out. He's also got the T-shirt, as you can see. Um, what is that all about? What does The Awakening Angler mean to you? What does that signal to your viewers? I have an idea, but feel free to speak.
well, the Awakening Angler is it's kind of twofold. It's That's the name of my channel, and my slogan, my catchphrase is
Hmm.
"Keep your tip up." And everything has multiple meanings. When I was a kid, when we were kids, my two cousins and I, my grandpa took us fishing whenever we would be around, and which was a lot for me. And as soon as you had a fish on, he would always start yelling at you, "Keep your tip up! Don't give him any slack."
Yeah.
And later on, when this started to take off, I remembered that, and it was more a personal meaning of don't stop, don't give up, don't go backwards, keep your tip up, keep moving forward, and do those things that make you feel good,
Yeah.
that make you feel good about yourself, that make keep moving. And that's the key. That's my core message in everything that I talk about. And it's not fishing's fishing.
Hmm.
Listen, it is what it is. Some days it's good, some days it's bad, whatever. I don't get too hung up in that stuff anymore, especially now that I'm not guiding. But the awakening angler comes from that awakening in my life personally, with some other things that put my fishing life in perspective. As a young guy, it was all about limit, 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 and
Yep.
grind it out. And I gotta do this, and I know more than everybody else, and I can, and part of it is age, and part of it is mental space for me. And the awakening angler was an awakening from being caught up in just that.
Hmm.
Everybody wants to catch fish. I want to catch fish, but I'm okay if I don't. And and I'm aware of that now, and I've awoke to the fact that there's more, and that's kind of a weird word for some people nowadays, woke and all that goes with it. Pardon my
Hmm.
French, but this is a little different. It's I look at the birds when I'm out in the lake more. I take an extra 10 seconds and I look at these walleyes, and I note how we have so many different color phases in our lake, and I I talk to the camera about seeing more than just, oh, I got 10 today.
Hmm.
How many did you get today? I, I, I
Yep.
I try to stay away from that and focus more on how can I help people through my knowledge enjoy their time on the water more, and be aware that there's more to it than just setting the hook all the time.
Yep.
And that for me is what's changed everything. Um,
And that's a
from
hard thing. That's a hard thing to step back from when you're A, big into fishing, but also B, a fishing guide, because that is a big, a big draw for people hiring a fishing guide is because they think they're going to catch a lot of fish. But at the same time, that was kind of I got into this. I've always been a big fishing person, but I wound up quitting a job in investments a number of years ago to start a guide service because it was what I was passionate about and what I felt like I needed to do in my life to go forward and keep my tip up, like you said. Um, so knowing that I was just getting into it, I felt like I was good. I could help people catch fish, but I wasn't going to compete with the people that have been fishing the lake for 30 years. So I wanted to offer them the all around experience, the appreciation of what's happening, the appreciation of the surroundings. Oh, by the way, we're probably going to catch quite a few fish too. But whether they catch 110 and we catch 87, who really cares, right?
Right.
And as years have
Right.
gone on, I've had to try to remember that because I've started to play that game a little more and I've gotten better at what I'm doing. So I can catch fish with a lot of the guys that are out there on my best days or even my average days sometimes. But I think it's a good reminder to people that, hey, yeah, you want to catch more fish, but boy, you should enjoy what you got because not every day is going to be a 100 fish day, but it's still an amazing experience. There's still so much to get out of it. So I don't know. When I first, I think you had commented on one of my videos a couple of years ago, and I watched a couple of your videos, and I was like, this guy just seems like a real cool guy that has the same vibe and mindset towards fishing. And I've been really excited to talk with you about it. So I'm glad you're here.
I appreciate that, and
Yeah.
and likewise, you meet people. The amount of people I've met in the last my let me start from the beginning. So this is the start of 2024 is the start of my 5th year with the YouTube channel. My wife and I have been. She does most all of my editing, and we've
Okay.
learned all of this on the fly from
Yeah.
scratch. And neither of us were terribly techie people. But in the last 2 years, when I kind of switched formats and everything has really taken off, um, the amount of people I've met has been astronomical. And even through all my years of guiding, yeah, people are people, and you run into some that are not as desirable as others, and whatever. That's all well and good, but most all of them were coming to us to enjoy themselves. Now some
Hmm.
come with expectations that are unrealistic, and anybody with expectations runs the risk of being disappointed, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
um, that fishing's fishing. There has to be more to it. It's not
Hmm.
just when you're in the zone, and you're so focused and you're watching your line and you're like, oh, I'm into it. But there's still more going on,
Hmm.
and I would much rather have all than just one. I'd rather have the
Yep.
full experience than just pigeonhole and only remember or focus. Oh, I only caught 3 fish today. Man, what a
Yep.
horrible day. You're on the lake all day. Give me a break. How bad could it
Right.
have been?
Right.
I get it. I'm not, and I don't want to say for anybody, any of my friends that know me, my wife, you get me on a 3 or 4 day streak where I'm not doing what I think I should be doing,
Right.
boy, I can be a bear,
Yeah.
and it
Me
starts
too.
weighing on me, and I start doing this, and I'm like, well, maybe I should go do this, or maybe I should do that, or I get to that spot, make 3 casts, and you're already checked out in your mind. You're like, no, this isn't the spot. I gotta go over here. Now and I'm like, so
Mm.
I don't say that lightly with the whole I'm not that hung up on catching fish because I am. It's what I do. I love to, but there is more to it. I watched a flock of divers this morning, diving ducks on my lake. There was probably 600 of them. They were just flying around in swarms like bees. And I sat there for a good 5 minutes just watching them, just seeing where they were going. They were playing leapfrog with each other.
Hmm.
Where else would I have seen that?
Yeah.
You know, I I only caught three
Yeah.
fish this morning. I'm okay with that. You know,
Hmm.
it's January.
Right.
These are all 3 days.
Exactly. It's
I
bonus
mean,
time, man.
yeah, it's crazy. Everything you do now is just gravy. So
Hmm. Well, that's very cool. Very, very cool. On a slight tangent, I want to hear the story about Homie the Clown.
I don't.
Do you have Homie in your car or your house, or is it in the boat?
I think it's downstairs on a rod. You want to give me a second?
If you want to, yeah.
Hold on. Yeah, this worked out perfect. I normally have the rods in the boat, but they were inside because I got to restring 2 rods.
Well, what do you know?
So I'll go. This is my setup. Are you guys you big blade fishermen?
That's one thing that I really haven't gotten into. We fish a ton of jigging wraps, hyper rattles, that kind of stuff. I've never really tried the blades on Sakakawea. I don't know why they wouldn't work. Love it.
So this is an I1 blade bait. made
Okay.
here locally to me. A friend of mine owns a company. So this is a VMC bladed treble that I've added on.
Okay.
I have them with and without. Some days that's the ticket. Some days I don't think it matters.
Hmm.
Um, it's just a black gold pattern, and I did a video with the owner of the company 2 years ago, and some of his blades are like this, where it's a colored body and then with the tape on it. Some of them are painted finishes, and but the ones like this, one of the things that he said on his video that day was, you know, you can be creative, do whatever. He goes, but these big spaces where the lure tape is, do something to break it up, just so it gives it that illusion of movement when it's being jigged. Because when you jig this up, I mean, it vibrates like that, and you can feel it right up the line, just like that. And so black gold for me in the walleye world is here where I am is probably my number one starting color pattern for early, late, any kind of stained water. But black gold will work anytime, honestly. And so I just started messing around with doctoring them up, and I put three dots down his lateral line, and then I put a red dot. So this is what we call the kill dot, and then this is where you want that fish focusing its attention on, and you want him to take it midship so he gets both trebles in him.
Makes sense.
So I had a red dot there, just a Sharpie marker, and we were fishing, and I don't know why it made me think of that, but that big red dot made me think of a clown's nose.
Hmm.
But the most famous clown I know is Homey the Clown. So if you're our age, you know that show. I mean, some people are
Uh-huh.
going to watch this video and go, "I don't know who Homey the Clown is," but
Yeah.
it was Damon Wayans from In Living
Yeah.
Color.
I used
So
to watch that
then,
show every night, every Thursday night.
hell yeah, that was yes, yes. And so when when then I was with my wife at Hobby Lobby, and we're walking through, and I see all the bead section, and I walk down through there, and here's this faceted rhinestone bead. See how it sticks up off the body right there?
Hmm.
And I bought a package of them. They got adhesive on them, and I put that big red clown nose on his side. Boy, and the next day with two of my buddies in the boat, it was just devastating, you know. And
Yeah.
they're both like, "What is that? What is that?" And every time I'd sit there, I'd be like, "Homie, don't play that." Yeah. So that's my little pet pattern. Um, and honestly, like this color pattern for me is this is an every single morning because I'm a first light guy. I don't sleep much,
Okay.
so I'm up early, and I'm dead of the summer. I'm always out there in the dark before the sun even cracks. And this is my low light killer.
Hmm.
Absolute black gold, you can never go wrong with. But yeah, the blades are. I encourage your viewers to, because I know the Midwest is a little different, and I have not. You asked me earlier, have I fished out there? No, I haven't. Do I want to? Yes, I do. I have a couple friends now in the industry that are up on Rainy Lake, in Minnesota and throughout Wisconsin, and I do want to get out there this summer badly. Um, but I know blades aren't really a thing now. I remember blades, not this brand, but Hedden used to make, still does, but Hedden makes the sonar. I remember those in my Gramps tackle box when I was a little kid. Um, I used to mess with them because you could feel the lure work. You know, I thought that was cool. And now the way we do it now, it's just like I don't. How often do you guys fish bait?
Ooh. Um, so like most of the summer, for whatever reason, the reservoir walleyes on Sakakawea just really love bottom bouncers and spinners. So guiding wise, we do that so much. But spring of the year is jig and minnow all the way.
Jig
and
and a
then it
minnow.
turns into
Yep.
jig and plastic for a little while, and then crawlers and bottom bouncers. And then sometimes in the summer we get a good snap jigging bite with jigging wraps. Sometimes it's not until the fall. And then in the fall we use jig and minnow again a lot of times too. But I've heard that the blade baits are a big cold water thing, but I've also heard they're a really big river thing. So all the river guys that fish the river use blades. Um, Not as many try them on the lakes for whatever reason. Not to say they won't work. I've seen people do it on Devil's Lake. I've heard of it working there in tournaments. Um, I haven't tried it a lot because usually if we're snapping jigging wraps, they start biting jigging wraps and then you just don't do anything else. But
It's I've caught fish with them all throughout the year, so it's my go-to search bait. Um,
okay,
as long it unless I'm in a heavy rock boulder field, um, because someone that's less experienced that they'll let that blade sit too long,
yep,
and you're going to lose them. You know,
yep,
my buddy that owns the company, he throws them up in the rocks all the time because he's got 10,000 of them at home. And it doesn't
yep,
matter.
yep.
And when you're good at it, or if you're in the river, especially so like the so I'll show you my setup. Um, so I'm fishing a JT Rods Black Rain. This is the 6.3 Black Rain. It's short and extra fast, medium action, extra fast tip, and I'm running a 3000 series reel with 10-pound braid and 20-pound floral leader. Um, and that has nothing to do with fish or teeth or anything like that. It simply acts as the blade falls through the water column. This heavy line acts as a rudder and keeps it from doing this or fouling hooks. The
Oh,
biggest
that makes
the
sense.
biggest reason people don't fish blades is because they're like, every time I cast, it's fouled up and I can't get it to run
Right.
right. That's because it's hitting the water and it's rolling over, which is what it's going to do. But on light
Mm-hmm.
line, it just goes right over it and hooks itself. This heavy
Huh.
line acts like a rudder and it keeps it straight. It hits the water. You check it as soon as it hits the water to make sure it landed right, and then
Yeah.
it'll fall straight. You're fine. Um, in rivers with current, I've had more issues with it fouling than normal. So it's funny. In current, that would not be my first choice. I would
Mm-hmm.
typically go with a jig or a snap wrap of some sort. But in my lake, all through the flats on the weed edges, um, it's such a great search bait,
Yeah.
and it's very user friendly. Every time you lift that tip, and if you don't feel that right, then you know that you got to snap, something's on it. Zebra
Yep.
mussel, piece of weed, whatever.
Yep.
Um,
And
but
I can't
yeah,
say that I've never used them. Like I own them and I've thrown them before. I love that feeling. I also love ripping wraps. And for some reason, I've caught two walleyes ever on Sakakawea on a ripping wrap. I can catch 50 of them on a jigging wrap and then throw a ripping wrap till my arm falls off. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the forage style, the fact that you got a jigging wrap and then you got a ripping wrap, and it's just a different
yeah, that
profile.
shad looking bait
We don't have
is
a ton of shad. It's mostly smelt, which are skinnier,
yep.
slender fish. So could have a lot to do with that, but
I would think it would have to. We have both in this lake. We have the Buckeye minnow, which it's not a smelt, but it's a small, sleek
mm-hmm.
minnow, and then we have a lot of shad. Um,
Yep.
so you can get away with either profile.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense with the blade bait too. I've also like Green Bay. I saw somebody doing, oh, who was it? It might have been can't remember. Somebody was doing a video Green Bay like last year and they were ripping blades and they were talking about it as it was kind of a new thing, but I thought I had heard like they do ripping wraps up there all the time. So it didn't really seem weird to me, but they were talking about the fact that there's gobies in the lake, that it mimicked a goby. Does that make sense to you? Maybe.
I don't know. I mean, the
Whatever.
gobies are everywhere now here. I
Sometimes
mean,
they just need something to say on a video.
I I don't know if it looks like a goby. I mean, um, it doesn't really. I mean, it just looks like a fish, of some sort of a minnow. I don't know. There's something about the vibrational signature or I've often wanted to get take it somewhere and have, there's got to be a frequency. It's giving off some sort of frequency, um, to see if you could change the frequency to affect a greater bite percentage. Because that frequency, I think, is more than anything what's drawing them into that attack mode.
Hmm.
I've had a couple times where I've had my underwater camera down, my Markham, and been in a spot where you could see it coming, and sometimes there's that walleye's right behind it, and it goes like this, and he never moves. Or now with forward facing sonar, you'll watch them, and they don't ever move, and it goes like this and goes like this, and then all of a sudden it moves just right, and they'll hit it like this before it comes back down, and it just stops. And so I
Hmm.
don't know. I Everything in fishing is theoretical. We have no way of proving any of this
Absolutely.
stuff.
Yeah.
But I think there's got to be something with that vibration that they just can't tolerate, and so I would assume, try to kill it. Um,
Yeah.
where like with a shiver minnow or a jig and wrap, I get a lot of fish that I swear they must be right over the top of it. Because
Yep.
you rip it and it drops back down. You rip it up again, and it's got them right like this. So
Yep.
something's got their attention, and they come over and they go, "Hey, what are you?" Boom, and then it jacks them. Now
Yep.
sometimes they eat it too, but
Yep.
um, the
It's
nature of
interesting. Like on Sakakawea, there's certain days where you'll hook every single one in the mouth, and then there's other days where 7 out of 10 you'll hook here, here. And I always thought that maybe as this thing's jumping around, they're just trying to pin it because they don't, to try to kill it or just to check it out. I don't know. But I've also thought what you thought is maybe they just see it and they just go, "What in the world?" And then they're not even touching it when you set the hook.
I
Who knows?
agree, because a lot of times you've got tip movement before you're solid.
Yep.
Sometimes they have it pinned right to the bottom. They do that a lot with those blades. The minute you start to rise up on that next jig, it's already solid,
Yep.
and your tip's loaded. So at some point from here to here, they grabbed it. Whether they pinned it right to the bottom, but there are days, like I say, you'll see that line straighten right out. Those are the days you never have to worry about hitting them under here, because they're just smacking it.
Those are the good
um,
days.
that's a jigger's dream right there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
and I do. If we had bigger, you asked me about trolling earlier. If we had bigger walleyes in this lake, I would troll more
Yeah.
personally. And I used to troll a ton, on this lake. I just want to feel them nowadays. I just
Same.
want to. I want to.
Hmm.
I have many friends out here that are guiding, and the summertime, because it's consistent and reliable. Half of them are trolling plugs, and half of them are pulling spinners,
Yep.
and they catch all the fish they need pretty much on a daily basis.
Yep.
Um, our fish suspend at that 12 to 14 foot range, and you can put anything in front of them, damn near. Um,
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Some people ask me questions when they're watching videos about, do you ever troll crankbaits or do you ever troll spinners? Well, the crankbait I don't do a ton of because I don't really like it, but spinners, like if they don't know that I'm a guide, I'm like, yeah, I did that so much the other 7 days of the week that I didn't want to do it today in the video. And
you're right.
it doesn't make an interesting video, I don't think. I mean, it's interesting to know how you set up your trolling rods and how you rig them, but watching people catch trolling fish isn't, I don't know. I don't think it's as exciting.
Not terribly, and especially walleyes. I mean, it's one thing if you're fishing salmon or whatever, and
Yeah.
and they're scrappy and they're at the back of the boat
Hmm.
thrashing, but a walleyes, by the time he gets to the net, he's usually done. Um, yeah, and they don't typically give you too much of a hassle there, and like I say, it's all preference. Um, and I spent a lot of years on this lake. It's funny. This is like my third incarnation on my lake here. When I was younger, all you ever did was throw a black and purple bucktail and a half a nightcrawler, catch all the fish you ever needed, and that was it. Um, and then I got done with that, and my buddies and I started trolling, and planer boards and everything. And I was doing that on Lake Ontario for money anyway. So I'd come down here and I'd put my same brown trout spread out as I would up there, and down here I'd catch walleyes on it, you know. Um, but now, like I say, and I do troll once in a while, and I do still love the pull spinners in the summertime, especially when it's hot out and you know, in those quiet mornings, or if it's flat calm. I do like the pull spinners. I don't run crawlers on them anymore. I run all plastics just because I
Oh,
don't like dealing with bait. But
yeah.
um, I've never seen that it makes any real difference um, for me
Hmm.
anyway.
Interesting.
But I like to cast. I like to cast, and
Me too.
anytime I can get one cast in, I'm I like it better.
Same here. So one more thing I wanted to ask you before we wrap this up is the other reason I thought it'd be really cool to talk to you is because you're also a fisherman slash YouTuber slash author. I don't know
Yeah.
how many of those are out there, but we're two of them anyway. Tell us about the book that you wrote.
I wrote. Funny, you would think I'd be more prepared for this.
You never saw that question coming, did you?
No, I don't have a copy of it handy. Um, it's funny. You asked me earlier about the name, The Awakening Angler. My editor was the one that came up with this, um, and she was amazing. And she helped me through the process of my first book. As my second book, first published book, I wrote a nonfiction book first. It just wasn't very good. It wasn't getting across the. I tried to I tried to use certain metaphor, like fishing metaphors, to try and explain nonfiction points, and it didn't really work. And so I made a story out of it. And you asked me earlier about the name, The Awakening Angler. That awakening, that kind of coming to that moment of realization, is what I wrote this book about.
Okay.
Not me personally per se. I mean, everything is autobiographical as a writer to some extent. You're drawing from your
Sure.
experience. Um, but it's a fictional character. He was a retired military um, man, and the day of his retirement, he realized that he wanted to go fishing, and he didn't really have any other plans other than that. And there was a couple things along the way that happened, and he started driving and fishing his way across country. And he leaves from New York and ends up in British Columbia. I don't want to give too much away, but the
Hmm.
journey along the way is I don't want to say spiritual in a religious way, but it really was a journey of faith for this character. Faith in himself, faith in things that he couldn't see and touch, and that love of fishing that grounded things and gave him that safe space. Motoring out in the morning when it's quiet, I get time to think, and I think we're all that way when we're
Hmm.
on the water, and that was something that was instrumental in this character's journey um, throughout the book, and it's the underlying. I tried to not make it a fishing nerd book where it was so technical and about the fishing. The fishing is just the the sugar that makes the medicine go down. I mean, it's just the way to tell the story, and the underlying currents are uplifting, and I've had excellent reviews of the people that have read it.
Great.
Um,
Yeah.
this, so
It sounds very uh, similar because mine is a memoir, which is a little more autobiographical versus yours is a fiction story. But that was the whole point I was trying to get across too, is that it's not a fishing book necessarily. Fishing was the vehicle for helping me figure out there's more to life than what I was chasing in the
yes,
past. So it was an
absolutely,
awakening experience of the
absolutely.
same kind. So very cool, man. Very
That
cool.
that's very kindred, and
Feel that.
that's why I don't know. That's why we're doing this. I mean,
Yeah.
why else would we? I have a desire to help people and to make and if I can make somebody's all those years guiding, you're teaching people a lot of things, and we're a fishing guide. We're the teacher. We come with us. We'll take you,
Hmm.
and at some point that really sunk in, that was what I was, and that was my calling in this lifetime. And as all of that started to come clear to me, everything started to blossom.
Hmm.
The channel started going up and up and up, and everything started coming into play because I finally realized why I was here, and I want to give people that little bit of joy, and if what I know can help them for one more fish or one more smile or one more high five while they're on the water, I've done my job. I couldn't be happier. That gives me a lot of joy. Um, I've never seen anybody unhappy while reeling in a fish. And if
Right.
I can help
What
somebody be happy, that's absolutely what I want to do.
what better job could there be, right?
What better job could there be? And you're right though. It's funny. How many times you've been asked, "What'd you write what's your book about?" Oh, is it? It's about fishing? Not really.
Yeah.
Yes, fishing's involved, and it's in the
Yeah.
book. And the second book is the same way. But it's not. It's not a how-to fishing book.
Right.
It's not a. It's just takes place while fishing, so to
Hmm.
speak. And
Yeah.
that's uh that's awesome. That's awesome.
Very awesome indeed.
And how I don't know about you, but how great did it feel when you were done? How long did it take you?
Surprisingly, so like I wrote it during the first big COVID winter.
Okay.
So at the time I got back from North Dakota and I had the idea that I was going to write it. And then I was living with my girlfriend at the time and then things didn't work out. She ended up moving out and I found myself completely alone for the whole first COVID winter. So I was like, well, let's knock this out. And I wrote solid until March, end of March.
Yep.
And then we started editing back and forth and stuff like that. And so I finished it basically in 6 months, which seems fast for a book, but I think I'd been thinking about it for like 5 years. And then
Sure.
it was just
Sure.
word vomit at that point. You know what I mean? It just came out, and which maybe wasn't especially being a memoir, it might have been a little overkill. Um, there was there were some nights where I would get done with a chapter and I'd be, oh my God. It was like going through around to therapy every day for 6 months in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah, well,
So
yes, in a lot of ways, it was an experience that I loved. I mean, it took me
yeah,
closer to a year, and I put it down twice for a couple months at a time, um, and then came into that winter of COVID, which was what,
yeah,
19? Yeah, because we're coming into 24 now. It's 5 years. So yeah, so my book was
mhm,
published in March of 19, and we started the YouTube channel shortly after that.
gotcha.
Um, so yeah, it had been in the works a year, but I mean these things. I mean, I wrote 240,000 words to be edited down to about 40,000.
Hmm.
Um, my editor kept sending me back revisions every day, killing all my babies. She goes,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's not moving the story forward. Nobody,
uh-huh,
nobody wants to know that,
yeah,
and but it was incredible, and I've had you put yourself out there. It's good and bad. I
yeah,
choose to only believe in the good, so that's what I see, and I've had so many people come up to me, and I try very hard to be very positive and to put out that message because that's what I want to put out, and that's what I want people to see and hear, and the gratification that comes from someone coming up to you and saying, thank you, I needed to hear what you said, or I read your book
Hmm.
and I thought it was, it resonated with me, or I
Hmm.
had one guy, you won't believe it if I tell you, I've had two guys that had massive heart attacks that were in the hospital for, one was in the hospital for over a month. And he goes, I listen to your daily fishing report every day. He goes, and it gave me something else to think about. And he goes, I listen to you every day. And he goes, he goes, I'm going to tell you right now, it's what got me through. I'm looking at him and I'm crying. I got tears rolling down. I'm like, are you kidding me? And he's thanking me. I'm thanking him. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's how much more, how much better could that be? How much better could that be to try to bring a little happiness to somebody in some
Right.
little way? Listen, that tip, I have guys that pick apart my pictures every day, asking me what this is, what that is, because you're showing them, like
Yep.
you're out there physically showing them. And I like most of us, I grew up as a in fisherman kid,
Yeah,
and
me
to
too.
me the linders are the holy grail,
Yeah.
and I aspire to be in that same vein of, like, those guys changed how everybody fished, but they, for me, that formula of theirs, that location plus presentation equals success. I'll never forget it, and and I try when I do instructional stuff to break it down like that, and to give everybody the why. Why do you do
Hmm.
it this way? What well, I only know my why, but I'll tell you
Yep.
my why. And same thing. I have guys come up to me every time somebody sees me. Man, I've learned so much from you on your channel. It's unbelievable. I've never But people aren't putting necessarily that kind of stuff out. A lot of people put out, "Hey, look how great I am! I can catch
Right.
fish every day,"
You know,
which is, if that's your thing, that's
nothing
your
wrong with
thing.
that.
My thing
Yeah.
is, I want to teach, and teach isn't even the right word. I just want to show this is what works for me, and I'm the
Yep.
first person to say that if you ever hear me say only this way works,
Yeah.
stop listening to me right away, because
Yep.
that's what I do to somebody else. You know, if you tell me
Yep.
there's only one way in fishing, I stop listening, because you're either kidding yourself or trying to kid me. One of the two.
Yeah. I've tried to be very clear to the same thing in my channel and I don't say it every video, but every time I think about it, I'm like, I'm not here. I don't like the word expert. I don't like the word influencer. All I'm doing is showing you my experience and showing you what I've learned. I'm out there 100 plus days a year, so I probably have some things that can help you, but it's just what I did. That's all this is. If you
Yep. And
like what I did, that's great.
if you make it repeatable, so somebody can take what you showed them and put it into their own style. Listen, then so I'll show somebody how I jig, for whatever. So use that as a starting point. Doesn't mean you're
Yeah.
locked into that. You don't have, but if it works, great. If it doesn't, then go slower, go faster, go higher, go lower, whatever.
Yep.
Um, a lot of times I think people just need a starting point,
Yeah.
and I know for me, like that winter of COVID, I spent a lot of my time on YouTube looking for the very videos that I end up now putting out, and there was nothing.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, I kept looking at my wife, going, we're sitting around. I just want to watch a video of something local." There was nobody around, and
There you go.
I'm like, all right, well, let's start something. And it went from there, And but like I say, I mean, I have something to offer. I've been a professional fisherman for 30 years,
Hmm.
um, in a lot of different circumstances, and that kind of experience is invaluable. And if you can pass that on in ways that will benefit other people, it's almost, I don't know, kind of almost feels like my duty.
Doesn't
I
it?
mean, if
Yeah.
you have the ability to help, you should, So I enjoy it. I enjoy creating content. I'm guiding thousands of people a day, at once, as opposed to 2 or 4.
Yeah.
You know,
That's the way I look at it too. It's a great compliment. It's a lot of fun, and I don't know. This has been a lot of fun as well. I've really appreciated this time to talk with you.
Brett,
You
this has
just
been
want to drop.
outstanding.
You just want to drop. Where can they find you? Where's your YouTube channel, website, book? Whatever you got.
Everything is the Awakening Angler. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Um, you can go to my website is walleyefest.com. That's our derby that we do in the spring here on Oneida Lake. We had 1,400 derby participants last year, and
Oh wow,
we're looking to double that this year. My goal is
that's
I
huge.
had friends of mine last year, opening day of the derby, who were sending me pictures like, you did this, and there was boats as far as the eye could see on the lake. We had a great tournament. We gave away, God, almost $15,000 in prize money. It was
So cool.
awesome. So
So cool.
yeah,
Well, thanks.
Awakening Angler. You can find me for all that stuff. There's links to my Shopify store for the book, for merch, you name it. Everything is there.
There you go. Thanks so much
Brett,
for talking, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed
Take
it
care.
thoroughly.
All right, bye.
Keep your tip up.
There you go.